You're listening to the Finding Christ in the Old Testament series, preaching by Pastor Rick Dressler at Maple City Baptist Church in Chatham, Ontario. For more information about Maple City, please visit us online at maplecitybaptistchurch.com.
2 Samuel chapter 9 this morning, starting at verse number 1. David said, "Is there any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? And there was of the house of Saul his servant, whose name was Ziba. When they had called unto him, David, the king, said unto him, Art thou Ziba? And he said, thy servant is he. And the king said, Is there yet any of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God unto him? And Ziba said unto the king, Jonathan hath yet a son, which is lame on his feet. And the king said unto him, Where is he? And Ziba said unto the king, Behold, he is in the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, in Lodabar. Then King David sent and fetched him of the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, from Lodabar. And when Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, was come unto David, he fell on his face and did reverence. And David said, Mephibosheth, and he answered, Behold, thy servant. And David said unto him, Fear not, for I will surely show thee kindness for Jonathan thy father's sake, and will restore thee all the land of Saul thy father, and thou shalt eat bread at my table continually. And he bowed himself and said, What is thy servant, that thou shouldest look upon such a dead dog as I am? And the king called Ziba, Saul's servant, and said unto him, I have given unto thy master's son all that pertaineth to Saul and to all his house. Thou therefore and thy sons and thy servants shall till the land for him, and thou shalt bring in the fruit, that thy master's son may have food to eat. But Mephibosheth, thy master's son, shall eat bread always at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then said Ziba unto the king, According to all that my lord the king hath commanded his servant, so shall thy servant do. As for Mephibosheth, saith the king, he shall eat at my table as one of the king's sons. And Mephibosheth had a young son, whose name was Micah. And all that dwelt in the house of Ziba were servants unto Mephibosheth. So Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem, for he did eat continually at the king's table, and was lame on both his feet. This is the word of the Lord. And my prayer this morning is that all of us will see the beauty and the power of this text. We have our young people in with us this morning. We do this once a month. It's always a pleasure to have them here. And I always try to do something to keep them engaged. But the truth is, they always do a great job when they're here. But this is such a great story that I want to give you an illustration that I think will help us understand how this story is written and be very powerful. So I need one young person. Really? Braden, you want to do this? Okay, come up here. Fantastic. That was quick, man. Now, you should know what the illustration is, because this boy in the story had a broken leg, so I'm going to break both your legs this morning. I won't do that, but you know what? Well, just sit down right there, okay? Just sit down. Let's just have a little talk, okay? I'm going to tell you a story, because this is a great story. But you got to listen intently, because I'm going to ask you a question, all right? But it should be easy. Are you ready? Okay. There are two boys. One is named Pete. The other is Repeat. You got that? Okay. So the two boys are? Pete and Repeat. Good, okay. So they're walking through the forest, and Pete jumps over the fence. Who is left? Right. There are two boys, Pete and Repeat. Okay? They're walking through the forest. Pete jumps over the fence. Who's left? There are two boys. Okay? Pete and Repeat, and they're walking through the forest. Pete jumps the fence. Who's left? Repeat. All right. You're a good man. Now, do you understand that the name Repeat means say it again? And we could be doing this all day. You're a smart boy. Give him a hand, okay? Now, he is a smart boy because it took me 18 years to figure that out. Okay? And my parents would do that. It's like Pete and repeat. Have you heard that before? You've heard that story? Okay, your parents were cruel like that as well. All right? But we understand this morning that we use repetition and it's powerful. Right? If we want to get something across to somebody, we will say something and we'll repeat it over and over again. If you've been in a classroom and you had a good teacher, one that just didn't try to fail you, they would repeat what was important. It's the same in Hebrew narrative. And you got to get this because this by itself is a great story. But when you see what the writer does with repetition, he focuses our attention on one true, powerful point that we cannot afford to miss this morning. It's interesting to note that in this short chapter of 13 verses, oftentimes when you read 1st and 2nd Samuel, you'll have a parallel passage in Chronicles, and it sort of tells the same story. There is no parallel passage with this story. There's not. And in 13 verses, the word king is used 12 times. 12 times. Whether it's in reference to David as a king, or your king's servant, or the king's table, 13 verses, 12 times, the writer says, I want you to notice the king. Then the name Saul, the former king, the former dynasty. It wasn't a dynasty, it was a one-shot wonder. It was just Saul. He's gone. He's dead. His doomed line is over with. Saul's name is mentioned 7 times in this text. 7 times. Then you have the word table. King's table. Mentioned 4 times. The word kindness, which means loving faithfulness, loving kindness, mentioned 3 times. The place, Lodabar, mentioned twice. And the idea that this servant is lame is mentioned twice. And you might say, big deal, mentioned twice, 13 verses. Yeah, but listen to me. If you mention the town once, or mention the fact that this boy was lame or crippled one time, you get the picture. It doesn't have to be repeated. But it is. And I want you to know something this morning. The writer here does this on purpose. Because what he wants us to know as we read this text and see the repetition in all these words is this. That the sovereign king is looking now for his enemy. And not to punish him, but to show him loving kindness. And this one who lost everything would have everything restored to him, and not only that, this unworthy one would sit at the king's table for the rest of his life. That's a great story. It's a powerful story. And so, this morning we're going to review this story. And although there are no parallels in Chronicles on this chapter, there is a great parallel in the New Testament. And you can't miss it. And many of you already, as you read the story, you didn't miss it. Right? And so, here's the story for us to review as we look into the story of Mephibosheth. David has been busy. The kingdom has been expanding. Right? There are major battles that have taken place, skirmishes to take care of. And so this now is over, but in the process, there's a new regime. It's a new government. And so, a lot of administrative stuff happening. We saw already that he sets up his cabinet members and his ministers, and that's happening. And you know how this goes. When we're busy, time seems to just fly, and it's like, oh my goodness, it's the end of October already. Does anyone know where 2015 went to? It's gone. And so this has been David's life, and we get this idea now that after all the hustle and bustle and the busyness of life and the government and the kingdom, he sort of sits back and now he's reclining and reflecting. He's thinking about how he got here. It's been an amazing ride, an unbelievable story. We have seen it. We have traced it through our messages on Sunday morning. He's thinking about how God brought him to this place. And then he is thinking about those that he lost in the process. We know that there are names that come to our minds, that just the name causes our eyes to well with tears. It causes us to clear our throats, because those individuals made a powerful impact on our life. Pastoring, you see that often, that there are people who have gone on, and you love them and you miss them, and just their name reminds you of the impact they had in your life in this place. And so David is thinking, and he thinks about Jonathan, who he lost. Jonathan, his BFF, his best friend, who not only saved his life on a number of occasions, but truly showed him loving kindness. And as he's sitting reflecting, after this time has gone by, he thinks, I wonder if Saul has any relatives left. Because I made a promise to Jonathan. I promised that if something would happen to him, I would take care of his children. And I wonder, after all of this time, is there anybody left? And so he gets on Ancestry.com. Right? And there's nothing. Just nothing. But he remembers there's this guy named Ziba who used to work for Saul and manage his property. And calls him up and says, Ziba, is there someone left from Saul's house? And he says, and he qualifies it by saying, because I want to show them kindness. And that's important. In this day and age, the best way to solidify your kingdom, right? If you were the new government coming in, you killed everybody who could threaten the throne. Everybody knew it. Everybody did it. And so he says, listen, I want to know Saul's family members, not to exterminate them, but I want to show them kindness. Is there anybody left? And Ziba says, there is one. Jonathan had a kid. And the kid had a terrible accident. He's now crippled. He's probably about 21 years old now, but he's alive, Dave. And David says, where is he? Where is he? He said, well, he's staying with a guy, and he's staying with a guy out in Merlin. Now listen, I'm just telling you, that's the story. Lodabar literally means pastureless. We would say there's nothing there. So he's living in Merlin, right? There's no sub shop. There's no Little Caesars. There's no Tim Hortons. There's nothing there. And so he says, go get him. Go get him. And so they go out and they get Mephibosheth and they bring him in to David. And he comes in. And he stands before the king. And we don't quite understand this. I don't think we do. The sovereign king who has total sway of your entire life. Right? Live or die. He decides. No judicial branch. And he comes before the king and he falls on his face. I was thinking about this, and in our family, we have 6 in our immediate family now as it's expanded. And 4 of the 6 are kind of demented. Because 4 of them, whenever you see something on YouTube that's like, there's like a wedding party and they're all dancing on the table and they fall, 4 of us laugh until we cry, right? And or there's a kid running and he hits the wall and falls down and we laugh. And 2 of the other ones, I won't mention their names, Kim and Greg, they sort of, they're just horrified by it. It's like, you're so mean, you're so cruel, that's terrible. And we just keep on laughing. It is sick. I know it's sick, but it strikes me as funny. It's just my nature and makeup. But here comes a handicapped kid in 21 years old. And we don't know if he was on crutches or if he has 2 guys between him or 1 guy he's leaning on. But now he falls on his face. And it is so heartbreaking to even think that here is this crippled boy before a king, terrified, and he crumbles and falls on his face. And it's interesting here that David doesn't let him marinate in the terror. Because granted, I don't care what Ziba told him. This kid knew that his grandfather hunted David down to destroy him. For 10 years, chased him through the wilderness. I mean, they were enemies, and he knew how this works out. And Ziba could have told him anything, but still terrified. And David doesn't let him sit there in terror and anxiety. He says, hey, Mephibosheth, don't be afraid. And the writer here, in a powerful way, makes a point. I told you earlier that 12 times the word king is mentioned in this chapter. But in verses 6 and 7, where it's David directly talking to Mephibosheth, it's not the king. It doesn't use the word king at all. It just says David. David. David said, don't be afraid. And he lifts up his head and says, listen, Mephibosheth, I'm not going to harm you. I want to show you loving kindness. For your father's sake, my friend, I made a promise, and I'm going to show you grace and kindness. I'm going to lift your head up, and everything that your granddaddy had, you're getting back. And not only that, you're going to sit at my table. And you're going to feast continually. Now, one of the things we've lost in our world today is the beauty of a table and eating together. It's terrible. Listen, if you're in a family, put the stinking phones away, put the computer away, and at least I know it's not possible all the time, but at least a couple times a week, sit down and eat together. You have Christian friends and believers in this church, sit down and eat together. There is something about a meal that says, you're welcome, you're accepted, it is intimate, it's part of the family, it's important to do. Don't lose that. It's where we talk, where we understand where our roles are at, how we interact, how we know what's going on in each other's lives, how we care for one another. Eat a meal. And it doesn't get pancakes and sit down together, for Pete's sake. I hate pancakes. We're eating them as a family. But this is not just any table. This is David's table. It's not like, hey, I think we're having weenies and beanies tonight, we'll make it work. No, that doesn't happen here. It is the finest of bread. It is filet, it is lobster, it is creme brulee. Chocolate creme brulee is what it is. It's pecan pie. It is everything. And the king says, listen to me, Mephibosheth, you're going to be eating and dining at my table. And this kid's overwhelmed. He's overwhelmed. And he says, I'm a dead dog. My life has been one misfortunate step after the other. I lost my family. I lost my wealth. I lost my health. What you're telling me, King David, is because of your grace, you are going to restore everything that I lost, and I will eat at your table, and I will be as one of your sons. Can I tell you something? This is a dream come true. It's a dream come true for Mephibosheth, who had nothing, and now all of a sudden his future has been changed forever by the king. And the enemy who should have been executed, he was from the wrong line, the wrong family, is now reconciled back to the king, and he will become as one of his own children. What a great story. I mean, what a great story. Let me tell you another story this morning if I can. There were co-regents, like a king and a queen, who were given dominion over the entire earth. Their names were Adam and Eve. They had it all, man. They had the beauty of a pristine world. Can you imagine no sin, no corruption, no pain, no suffering? They had it all. And yet they believed the oldest lie in the world, which said, God is not good. God is trying to keep you from something, And if you do your own thing, you can be a God yourself. You can have your own way. You can have freedom. You can have liberty. You can have everything that you ever dreamed of. You can be your own God. You can determine for yourself. And they believed it. And what they thought would bring them freedom and liberty brought them bondage, pain, suffering, and death. Some things don't change, do they? And their line was then corrupted. Romans 5:19 tells us, by one man's disobedience, many were made sinners. And now the children of the king and queen are corrupt. We this morning are sinners by nature. We are sinners by choice. And we sin against the holy, righteous God over and over and over again. Don't tell me about how you're keeping the 10 Commandments. You cannot do it. You can't. I can't. Impossible. I never murdered anybody. Thanks. That really brings me great comfort this morning. But Jesus amped it up and said, you're angry at your brother without a cause? Those seeds of murder are already there. You can't win. We are sinners by nature. We are sinners by choice. And that sin has disabled us. Romans 3:10 says, there is none righteous, no, not one. And even the good that we do, the righteousnesses that we do, can I tell you something? God sees through all this. He looks at the motive of why you do what you do, and the good that you do. I'm going to give them money. I'm going to help them out. I'm going to babysit for them. I'm going to do this. And the motive is because I want them to think highly of me, or this makes me feel good, is a real selfish motive. And we all do it. This line is corrupt. None righteous. Nothing I can do. This line is lost. Romans 5:6 says that we are without strength. Without strength. Ephesians 2:12 says that without Christ, we are without Christ, having no hope in the world. That's this line. And yet, in that condition, enemy combatants of God, rebels, spiritually disabled to do anything, Jesus Christ came to seek and save that which was lost. And instead of pouring God's wrath upon those who deserved it, he took the wrath of God upon his own head. He bore your wrath. He bore my wrath so that we, through faith and repentance, could be made free through the power of Jesus Christ. He showed his loving kindness and extended mercy to us. And now Colossians 1:21 through 22 tells us that we who were sometimes alienated and enemies in our mind by wicked works, yet now hath he reconciled in the body of his flesh through death to present you holy and unblameable, unreprovable in his sight. And this morning, here's how this story goes. Those who are enemy combatants of the king are now reconciled through the blood of Christ. And everything that was lost in the fall is restored. It's restored. And not only that, not only are we in a better relationship where we are friends now, we've been reconciled, we become sons and daughters of this king, and we eat at his table and enjoy his fellowship forever. Christian, can I tell you something? You're living the dream, man. And I know, I'm not minimizing our life and the problems on this planet and the things we face and the struggles we have, but can I tell you something? That dream story is your story. It's my story. For those who have come to a saving knowledge of Christ, that is our story. And it's a wonderful thing. And so this morning, I just want to look at the story. It's powerful. It's amazing. And I want you to see how this story, not just the story of Mephibosheth and David, which is a precursor of the great king who bestows mercy and grace. Our story, how it ought to impact our head, our hearts, and our hands this morning. Okay, real simple. Head, hearts, and hands this morning. First, the head. We talk about the amazing loving kindness of our God. One writer says this: the first principle for grappling with the marvel of God's love is to recognize that he has no business, in a sense, loving whom he loves. You get that? when we think about this story, our story, we've got to grapple with this idea that the God of heaven has no business, in a sense, loving whom he loves. And that must sink in this morning. How many, I won't ask you to raise your hand because it could be awkward. Maybe I should. But how many of you guys, men and women here, you have seen a beautiful young lady who is sweet and kind and lovely inside and out, and then she starts dating. And then whether it's in church or at your house, they bring the guy home, and it's like, sister, what in the world were you thinking? Right? Some of you guys are that guy. So I know it's real quiet in here, like, yeah. Like, what were you thinking? Look what the cat dragged in. Sister, you are so much better than that. What are you thinking? And we, in our minds, we're thinking, she has no business loving that guy. We were with friends about a month ago, and they were telling their story. And the guy was telling me how he met his wife, and he said, when I met her, I hit the jackpot. And I'm like, me too, man. There is no way the woman that loves me should ever ought to love me. Never. Because I know myself. And she knows my story. And the fact is, that's the way it is with God. Some of you folks would never say this out loud. But you honestly believe that when God found you, he hit the jackpot. You wouldn't say it. I know, maybe some of you are arrogant enough to say it. But most of us would never say it. But can I tell you something? The way you live your life and the way you reason inside, you do believe that. Like, well, I'm not as bad as so-and-so. I mean, I don't have that many skeletons in my closet. I mean, I'm basically a good person. I mean, I don't have a lot of baggage that people got to... No, listen, can I tell you something? There was nothing lovable about Mephibosheth. And it wasn't because he was crippled. He was still a person. He was from a line that was destined to be destroyed. And in his inability, he had nothing to offer the king. I'll tell you something else this morning. There is nothing lovable about me or you. And the God, the all-seeing eye of God, looks into our hearts. Hey, we all look pretty on Sunday morning, most of us. Right? You put your best foot forward. But he knows what goes on behind closed doors. He knows about fighting over the chili this morning on your way in. I'm just looking. Okay, you, all right. Right? He knows what's really going inside. And the truth is, in our heads, we must come to this idea that God has no business loving whom he loves. We are unworthy. Unworthy. And Christ's love is so unexpected and so incredible. And we are so used to it. You knew the story of Mephibosheth, for most of you. You know your story. And yet it is commonplace for us now, and we forget the idea that this is an incredible love story of a king who showers kindness on those who are unworthy. And we ought to be amazed by it. And too many of us are not. Would to God that we would sing like the songwriter wrote, when I think of how he came so far from glory, came to dwell among the lowly such as I, to suffer shame and such disgrace, on Mount Calvary take my place, then I ask myself this question, who am I? Who am I that a king should bleed and die for? Who am I that he would say, not my will, but thine, Lord? The answer, I may never know why he ever loved me so. And to an old rugged cross, he'd go, who am I? Who are you? Nobody. You don't deserve, I don't deserve God's loving kindness, and yet, in his grace and in his mercy, he showers it on his enemies. You better get this story in your mind, in your head this morning. It doesn't stop there. Some of you folks, you really think that this is a book just to fill your head with. Certainly there's truth. We need truth. But the truth is given to change our lives. And it's not just Christianity's all head and getting the right answers and using apologetics and polemics and all. No, listen, that's part of it. But the heart has to be involved. My heart cannot love what my head does not know, right? What I don't know. But there has to be a heart involved here. There has to be a heart. And so the truth is, we, as we think about this story in our head, must allow this to permeate our hearts. And listen, David was thinking about God's kindness to him and Jonathan's kindness to him. He was ruminating on that and meditating on that, and it moved into his heart. It's a powerful thing. But listen, unlike David, you and I have something far greater than that in our hearts if we're saved this morning. It's called the Holy Spirit of God. Can I tell you something? I can't love you, especially you, you too, trying to be vague on my pointing, all right? I can't. You know who I love by default? I love my wife, I love my kids, but the truth is, my heart loves itself. It loves itself. And for too many of us, we know the story in our head, but it's never permeated our heart to say, wait a minute, this story is my story, and not only should I ruminate and meditate about what God has done in his loving kindness, but he does something better than that. Not only has he shown loving kindness to us, but this very God then steps into our life and into our heart by his Spirit so that this love can be worked out by him. By him. I cannot do it without the power of the Spirit of God. He is within me. He's within you as a believer. And so as I think about the story, my story, God's grace, the Spirit of God interacts with that. And God himself is within me, longing to show that loving kindness to other people. This is Galatians chapter 2:20. You know it. You've heard it. I am crucified with Christ. Paul is speaking. He's alive while he's saying it. What he's talking about, it's my flesh, this old man. I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I. I'm alive right now, but it's not me. It's Christ who lives in me and through me. And for too many of us this morning, we got this covered. But we're not thinking long enough or hard enough about it. We're not allowing the Spirit of God to sort of take that and grow that, and then allow him to live through us and show the same loving kindness to others. We don't think enough about it. We don't allow the Spirit to control us and use us. This is exactly why too many Christians have this attitude about them when it comes to other people. It's arrogant. It's disgusting. We have forgotten where we came from, and we're allowing our flesh to live and not the Spirit to live through us. But some folks come to church and they say, you know, hey, elders, here's the deal. We need to sort of get more normal people in church. We need more normal people. Okay, I presume then that you'll be leaving. What does that mean? Normal people? From the top down, there ain't nobody normal here, man. Nobody. Or this idea that we see people who are not like us or they're disadvantaged and we treat them like garbage. Why? Because we're not thinking about the story and we're not allowing the Spirit of God to generate this love and affection toward God and then to live through us. And so we treat people like garbage. You know, some of you folks, if you go out to a restaurant and there's a waiter or a waitress there who's busting their rear end, maybe working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet, and you walk in there like, give me a goblet of something cool and refreshing. Don't you know who I am? And you treat those people like garbage. Who does that other than a millionaire on Gilligan's Island? The problem is, you know the story. You've not allowed the Spirit to touch your heart, and not only just touch your heart, but the God who lives within you to work his way out. To work his way out. I heard one of my kids say the other day, inhale the Spirit and let him live through you. It's not happening, and we need to. And when our head knows the story and our heart marinates in that, and the Spirit brings us to a sense of our unworthiness, and he reminds us that it's Christ living through us, then what happens is what we said this morning in Sunday school. I understand that it's one beggar telling another beggar where you can find bread. That's what this is all about. It's not, I'm a higher beggar. I'm an extraordinary beggar. I'm in the upper echelons of begging. No, it's one beggar telling another beggar, hey, listen, this is the story of my king. I was an enemy of his. He showed loving kindness to me. Not only did he show loving kindness to me, but he himself, the God of love, lives within me. And I can inhale the Spirit, exhale the Spirit, whatever. I can let him live through me. It's a beautiful thing. And so our head, our hearts, and then our hands. 1 John chapter 3, verse 8. John, writing to believers, says, my little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but in deed and in truth. And the idea is that as we hear the story, as we think about the story, and as the Spirit of God touches our heart and works within our heart, that there's something then innately within us that has to work its way out. Don't just say, I love you. But in deed and in truth, there's something now, when I understand what the King has done for me, there's something by the Spirit of God that says, it has to ooze out of you. It has to explode out of you. It has to say, wait a minute, if I was a sinner, destined for hell, Christ stepped in, I was unworthy, I didn't deserve anything, and yet he took my place, and he showered mercy on me. How then can I not shower mercy on others? I'm talking to Christians this morning now. Can you explain to me this morning why you can't show loving kindness to your spouse? Rick, you don't know her. You don't know him. Okay, granted, you married him. You married him. But what I can't understand is you can show loving kindness to other people. Why can't you show loving kindness to your spouse? Why can't we show loving kindness to that awkward teen that keeps on telling the same stupid joke over and over again? When we were younger, I'm the oldest, and my middle brother went through a stage where he was always telling jokes in the backseat of the car. And they were the dumbest jokes ever, and he wouldn't stop. Right? Any parents know what I'm talking about? Yeah, okay. Now, I was always funny, so my jokes were always funny. His were not funny, all right? We had kids like that. We had to say, one of our boys said, okay, listen, you're really funny, but you got to quit it, because after 20 minutes of the same joke, it's not funny anymore, right? And they're awkward and dorky. Why is it, though, that Christian teenagers can't show loving kindness to other Christian kids? Why is it that we as mature adults can't see that it's really hard to be a kid today? I got to tell you, I'm 46-ish, and I would not want to be a teenager today. I don't understand these people say, oh, I wish I was a teenager again. Are you insane? Do you remember what it was like to be a teenager? It's not easy. And how is it that we as a church of believers cannot show loving kindness to our kids? How is it that we cannot show loving kindness to the new convert who has real rough edges? That guy, did you see that guy? You see her? Yeah, they're sinners. Just like every Tom, Dick, and Harry in this place. They're sinners. Years ago, we had a big week going on here. It was years ago, probably, I don't know, maybe 12 years ago now, maybe 13. And we had a special group come in, and a big day, we're trying to get 100 people in church. I think it was 100 people in church. And it was really exciting. We had different churches come in. And in the parking lot, pulls up this car, and a guy comes out of the car, and he had the hugest spiked mohawk you have ever seen. It was it was impressive, actually. I mean, it was shaved on the side. It was a mohawk, and he made a duct tape tie. Coming to church, a tie. It was fantastic. A duct tape tie. And I was in the back, and Kim and I ran out to meet him and greet him and tell him how thankful we were here. And then we came in the building, and as we came in, we heard one of the pastors say, "Did you see that freak that just came in?" I sat up here, and that morning I wept for our attitude toward the lost and toward new converts. Yeah, he's a freak who needs Jesus. She's a girl who doesn't know what's going on in her life. She's looking for attention in all the wrong places. Yeah, he's messed up. Or he just got saved, and I can tell you, he's been doing this for 30 years. It ain't changing overnight, man. Did you? Oh, yeah, some of you are perfect. I forgot. You didn't need any of that. That's right. It doesn't work that way. Why is it that we cannot show grace to our political opponents? Oh, that's too fresh, isn't it? Oh. Let's think about it for a minute. They're still human beings, man. And we live in a world where we just want to scream and yell at each other. No one listens to be understood, and it's insane. If the church would be the church, and I'm not talking about, oh, we love everybody, and la, 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 we're throwing flowers. You know that's not what I'm talking about. Love and truth. But there's not enough love for people if I've been showered with loving kindness, I ought to shower it on others. What about those who have been past mistakes in our lives? We have history. Why can't we show them loving kindness? Can I tell you something this morning? Listen, Christian, believer, you and I have sinned against God far more than anyone can ever sin against us. Did you get that? You arrogant, self-righteous Pharisee. Can I tell you this morning why we don't show loving kindness? Because we've forgotten the story. We are not amazed by it or overwhelmed by it anymore. We're underwhelmed by it. We're unamazed by it. And what I'm telling you this morning is this. When the church finally wakes up and in their head they understand the story, not the story you want to write, the story that was written. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. The wages of sin is death. But God commendeth his love toward us, and while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. You don't deserve it. I don't deserve it. That's why grace is amazing. And when we understand that story, and not only that God has been loving to us and his loving kindness, but this very God then dwells within us by his Spirit and to help us remember that and to live through us that loving kindness, we at that point, it has to come out. It has to come out. And if it's not, something's wrong with your head, your heart, or your hands this morning. And would to God we leave this place and be amazed again by the story. Can I tell you something? As great as a story that Mephibosheth and David is, as great as that story is, your redemption is the greatest story ever told. It should drive us to our knees in thankfulness and gratitude. And not just say, oh, thank you, Lord. But it ought to change the very fiber of who we are. And I'm talking to teenagers. I'm talking to young, single, married, older, whatever. It should change us. So my challenge for you today as we think about Mephibosheth and David, it's a great story. Think about your own story. It's even greater. It's eternal. And the king, the sovereign king of the universe, shows up in Merlin, in Chatham, in Cleveland. He says, I don't want to destroy you. I want to shower you with loving kindness. And through faith and repentance, we became a son or daughter of the King, who will forever enjoy his fellowship around his throne, feasting with our Savior. We're living the dream, man. We're living the dream. And we've become accustomed to it. And we ought not. Let's have a word of prayer this morning.